Only 26 games remain for the Blue Jays in the regular season. They'll make a stop in Texas starting tonight. 3 with the Rangers at Globe Life Field. First one features a red-hot Bo Bichette and Ross Stripling, who's been awfully consistent lately as the Blue Jays get set to face an old adversary tonight, one that is not in the playoff race. I know that generates a few smiles coast to coast. Hey, everybody, I'm Jamie Campbell. Good to see Caleb Joseph back in the chair as Joe gets some richly deserved time off. The road has been good to the Blue Jays. Note the last couple of trips, this one included. Prior to that, they went into New York, took 3 of 4, and swept the Red Sox at Fenway. And then for this trip, off to Pittsburgh, they won all 3 games. And then took 3 of 4 from the Orioles. So in they go to Texas feeling awfully good about themselves. And here is why. The gap now between the Blue Jays and the Orioles is 4.5 games. Baltimore's in Boston tonight. The Rays are taking on the Yankees. So we'll keep an eye on those games and see where things change by the end of the evening. A look at the Blue Jays lineup for the game tonight. You won't see Lourdes Gurriel Jr., and we'll save the details on that one for Hazel May and Shai Davidi. You will see one of the hottest hitters in the game right now, Bo Bichette, batting third, and he just happens to be 3 for 5 with 2 home runs against tonight's starter for the Texas Rangers, Dane Dunning. So let's bring in Caleb, who had a conversation today with Bichette about what he's going through at the plate right now. It seems he's gone through some kind of transformation, hasn't he?
Yeah, he really has. And he's been a one-man wrecking crew this entire road trip. And I had a conversation with Bo today, and I said, look, what's the difference? He said, the fear of not chasing is no longer in my mind. And that's been a big deal for him. A lot of people have focused on the fact that he chases. The reality is when Bo is super aggressive and he doesn't fear swinging at a bad pitch, when he doesn't fear looking silly on an out-in-front slider, he uses that aggressiveness to his advantage, and that is where the slug comes from. Let's look at some of these clips from the past road trip and how he's been able to do it. His aggressiveness has been noticeable. This is the 2-strike approach that has really changed the game. He went back to this. There was a period in time where he did not go to that. He's feeling super comfortable with the 2-strike approach. You can see there's no leg lift, and he's just ready to rip. Heel comes down, boom, ready to go. Why is that important? Because that tells me he's not fearful to get to 2 strikes. When he's not fearful of getting to 2 strikes and not chasing, he can do this on a 1-0 count. He can let it rip. And if he misses, he doesn't care anymore. He's not worried about trying to see pitches that are 2 inches off and take those pitches anymore. What he does is he slashes, he slugs his way into the leaderboards. And when he does that, he's in good shape. There's a big deal with him having to not chase. That cannot happen. We can't glorify the chase numbers when it comes to a player like Bo Bichette. He has got to be able to go out there and let it rip. Fans have got to be okay with him chasing a few pitches for the slug to go up. He's not going to be a Matt Chapman that looks at a pitch 3 inches outside all the time. He's going to let one rip. He's going to whiff, but with that, he's going to hit 5 homers in 6 games and put the team on his back. And I'm excited to see what he does the rest of September.
And there are lots of reasons why him putting the team on his back has been so important over the course of this very successful trip. And we'll get into one of those reasons with Caleb in just a minute. First, here is the meeting on the mound for the first of 3 down in Texas. Dane Dunning has a 53.1 ground ball percentage. That's second best in the American League next to Framber Valdez. So we'll keep that in mind as he induces ground balls against the Blue Jays tonight, or maybe he won't. Who knows? On the other end, there will be plenty of support for Ross Stripling in Texas tonight. And with those details, off we go to Hazel May.
Jamie and Caleb, Ross Stripling described what it would be like returning to his home state of Texas this weekend as, quote, very, very busy. Stripling grew up about 20 minutes from Arlington in South Lake, Texas. That's a suburb of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and the population roughly 32,000. Now, Stripling left Baltimore ahead of the team on Wednesday, spent the off day with his family at home Thursday, and told me he was pretty pumped pumped up about pitching in Game 1. Why? He said, well, after tonight, he can relax and spend the rest of the weekend catching up with friends and family. And speaking of which, Stripling told me he left over 60 tickets for friends and family to watch him pitch tonight. What they'll be watching is Stripling pitching in his 200th career game, his 4th career start here in the Lone Star State, and he's hoping to duplicate what he did in his last outing, and that is help lead the Blue Jays to a victory. If you remember, Stripling allowed just 3 earned runs over 6 innings of work with 8 strikeouts against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, take a look at these numbers. Stripling has been reliable, dependable as he could be for the Blue Jays, hoping he would really help them out since rejoining the rotation. And as you take a look at his numbers, his last 4 starts since coming off the IL, all quality starts. He told me he feels his body of work since starting has earned him the right to go deeper in ball games. And pitching coach Pete Walker absolutely agrees.
He's really evolved, I think, this year into an established major league starter. He's always been good at it in the past, but I think this year he's really taken it to another level. We've been talking about that because I think in LA he was more of a 2 times through the order guy, and he kind of knew that, and he kind of fell victim to that in some ways. But I think now he realizes his stuff is as good as it's ever been, and with that changeup, he can face a lineup 3 times.
He's definitely earned that right, I think, and like a lot of the guys, I think a lot of it depends on the state of the game, the score of the game, who's coming up, all that kind of stuff. It's not going to be a hard stop 3rd time through the order for Strip. He's done more than earn, I think, a little bit of a longer leash.
It's the getting ahead and able to use his, his changeup, his slider, his fastball, all to put guys away, but it's really about getting ahead with him, and he does a great job of staying on his fastball lanes and pitching, using the slider off his fastball lanes, using the changeup off fastball lanes, and the curveball as well, so attacking the zone.
Joined now by MLB insider Shai Davidi, and the numbers tell us that Ross Stripling is having the best season since his All-Star campaign back in 2018. Now, he will not have Lourdes Gurriel Jr. behind him in left field, and that's because he's been placed on the 10-day IL with a left hamstring strain. If you remember in the series finale, he landed awkwardly on a close play there at first base. So I asked John Schneider whether Raimel Tapia, who will be making the start in left, will have the majority of the time in that position. He said he will, but also expect to see maybe Whit Merrifield and Kevin Biggio as well. As far as Gurriel, Shai, what kind of timeline are we looking at?
That's still to be determined, Hazel. I think the Blue Jays are going to be very curious about what the next couple days of recovery look like for Gurriel. But the thinking right now is that this may extend beyond the minimum 10 days. He could return potentially as early as September 18th for the finale of the series against Baltimore at home. But unless he recovers enough, the Blue Jays can't rush him back. And one of the things that they wanted to do was have the type of roster depth, big league roster depth that they have right now to paper over these kind of absences. It's hard to replace Lourdes Gurriel Jr., especially the type of hitter he is. He's a bit of a unicorn in this lineup. But they do have options, and they are going to have to wait until Lourdes is good enough to play.
So there will be changes in the outfield for the Blue Jays. League-wide, MLB announcing some rule changes effective 2023. Among them, the elimination of the shift. Pickoffs are now limited, and you're going to see bigger bases. But I guess, Shai, the one change that everybody is really talking about is the implementation of the pitch clock. And Kevin Gausman was a little taken back. He had heard rumors that it was coming, but not necessarily as soon as it will be.
Yeah, and he doesn't seem to be very much of a fan of this, like a lot of players, actually. And he really talked about not being certain it's going to make as much of an impact as everybody's anticipating. Certainly based on what's happened in the minor leagues with the pitch clock over the past couple of years, it's really made a dramatic difference in game times. But this is the one that's going to most fundamentally change things for the way players go about things, not just for pitchers on the mound, although obviously for someone like Kevin Gausman, who works at a pretty good pace, maybe not as much as, say, a Jordan Romano or an Alek Manoah, who are a little bit more deliberate. But it's also going to have an impact for hitters at the plate, too, because their process is going to be completely changed. If you're the type of hitter that likes to step out between pitches and maybe think about what you just saw and think about how you're going to attack the next pitch, well, all that has to go a lot faster because you've got 9 seconds to get back into the box.
4 players on the competition committee actually voted against these rule changes. One of those players is the Blue Jays' Whit Merrifield. Why, and what do you think that says about the relationship between the league and the union?
Well, Hazel, the competition committee was a creation that came out of the lockout this past offseason, and the thought was that this could be a bit more of a collaborative thing. It would give players a voice into the process of changing rules and making decisions about the way the game is played. But if you look at the way this played out, I mean, it's basically nothing's really changed between players and owners. The owners block on the competitions committee voted for. There were 6 of them. The players block on the committee was against. There was 4 of them. And it's not that the players were necessarily against the changes, but in talking to Whit Merrifield, it was that the players had some concerns about unintended consequences that they wanted to see addressed. He did feel like the player concerns were heard, but ultimately when the decision to implement these changes was made, those concerns were not taken into account.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what will happen in 2023. That's it from Field Level. Coming up, as we get set to watch Texas native Ross Stripling on the mound, we'll hear from another Texas native, Kevin Bichette. There's no other player who's been shifted against more than Bichette. I'll ask him about the new changes. Guys, back to you.
Let's ask Caleb about the new changes. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is going to be the pitch clock. I remember going back into the minor leagues in 2019, and the change was noticeably different. The game was way faster, and it wasn't as methodical. I don't initially like it, but I will say it might be a good thing. It might be a good thing. It might force players to actually think 4 and 5 pitches ahead in terms of catching. It might create some more gut intuition, not rely so much on the old wristband.
It might. The Blue Jays, as Caleb mentioned, have been carried recently offensively by Bichette. If this guy catches fire, imagine how well they'll do in the win-loss column. We'll discuss Vladdy's struggles with Caleb when we continue on Blue Jays Central.